Poland's Senate has adopted a resolution classifying Russia's government as a, quote, terrorist regime.
Putin and his apparatus of violence have returned to the brutal practices of the Stalinist and Nazi regimes. Therefore, it is necessary to defeat Russia and deprive it of any opportunity to threaten its neighbors. The Senate of the Republic of Poland calls on all countries that advocate peace, democracy, and human rights to recognize the government of the Russian Federation as a terrorist regime.
While Polish senators call Russian officials a terrorist regime, some of their own officials have been seen as collaborating with organizations that have themselves been classified as terrorists. Earlier in October, Polish officials spoke at a charity auction in Washington dedicated to the far-right Azov battalion, known for its atrocities against the people of the Donbass. Well, let's cross live now to political analyst Nicola Mirkovic. Nicola, good afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, as I've just said, Poland's classified Russia as a terrorist state. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I'm quite surprised that Polish could use such a term. Let us not forget that these past years, Poland has actively participated in a lot of illegal military actions across the world. It participated in the 2003 illegal bombing and occupation of Iraq. It participated in the 20-year occupation of Afghanistan. Radoslaw Sikorski, Minister of External Affairs from Poland, was in Benghazi actively supporting rebel groups against the legitimate government of Muammar Gaddafi. And Poland participated actively in the bombing, the illegal bombing of Syria. So I think of all nations in Europe today, there's one nation which maybe should not be doing any finger pointing. And when you live in a glass house, you definitely do not throw stones.
What practical implications do you think there will be after Poland adopted this resolution? Or is it more of a statement, a gesture, than anything practical?
Well, I mean, a bit of both. I think, again, they're advancing this rhetoric that Russia is a terrorist state and it will do anything it can today in its position to portray Russia as the bad guy. What is, I would say, shameful in this is that terrorist is not the term that should be used, and we're getting very far from peaceful negotiations, discussions, getting back to the negotiating table. I think also Poland is showing that it will do anything to please the United States and show that it is a very loyal supporter of the U.S. war in Ukraine today against Russia. Probably in their mindset, they're thinking that if many countries start using this term of terrorist state, this will also hurt Russia, and it is some way maybe of trying to get dividends out of using this term. If ever Russia should lose in such a war, they would say, we told you it was a terrorist state, so now Russia has to pay because it was doing something which is totally illegal. So I think this is the mindset in Poland today.
Mm-hmm. Well, you touched on this in your previous answer. There have been a number of Baltic states, along with Poland, that have adopted similar resolutions. To what extent do you believe that they are influenced by Washington's policies against Russia?
I think they're totally influenced. I mean, this is we all know that this is a U.S.-led war. I mean, we can read Jeffrey Sachs, Noam Chomsky, Mersheimer. I mean, we all know this today, and the U.S. influence, unfortunately, in Eastern Europe is responsible for today's crisis in the Ukraine. And what is coming out of any of the governments in the Baltic countries or Poland has been filtered through Washington before. And this is the problem. This is the problem we have today in Europe today, is that a nation which is some 7,000 kilometers away is deciding and is dictating the diplomacy of normally sovereign European states. So I'm not saying that they're forcing the Poles to say this, but the Poles saying that they are today aligned on what the U.S. wants to do in that region are definitely discussing before with Washington what they should be saying. And unfortunately, this is they're unfortunately lip syncing U.S. foreign policy.
How do you expect Russia to react to this classification by the Polish government?
Oh, Russia will definitely not accept this, and again, this is not the appropriate term. There is a war going on, that's for sure. Terrorism is something quite specific. Now, we could always have a debate on what a state terror is, but there's nothing to do with that. And I think that again, Russia will rebuke this term. It will say it's void, should not be used today, and will condemn Poland for using this term, which is again It's rising tensions. It's throwing oil, tantamount to throwing oil on the fire. We're getting far away, too far away in the West from the negotiating table. And I think that Russia will also remind that these are not the types of terms that we should be using in the current situation from Poland, who, again, is also sending weapons and mercenaries to Ukraine and has a bit of responsibility of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Do you see any other countries in Europe taking the same line as Poland and classifying Russia possibly as a terrorist state?
Maybe some states which don't have a lot of links or interest today in Russia. I don't think any states with a lot of importing still today raw materials or gas or petrol from Russia would start using those terms, because that would definitely bring difficult situations to those specific countries who still do need Russia today. Whatever they could be voicing through their own diplomacy, they would not go as far as to saying that Russia is a terrorist state. But it is a precedent. It is a precedent. I do think, again, that it is pushed by the hawks in Washington, D.C., and maybe a couple other countries will try to jump on board and try to start using this expression, again, to be finger-pointing Russia as the ultimate bad guy on earth.
Mm-hmm. Well, and just to pick you up, actually, on reliance on trade and cooperation with Russia, is obviously no secret that Europe is facing an energy crisis, spiraling inflation. To what extent do you believe that Polish officials adopted this resolution possibly to distract away from some of the domestic problems at home?
Oh, a lot. A lot of countries today in Western Europe are distracting their own populations with the war in Ukraine. We did not see as much distraction when there was a war in Iraq, when there was a war in Afghanistan, when there's a war currently today in Yemen. So they're using this. Of course, the Ukraine war is closer to us than the others, but they still were major wars. And let's not forget that the U.S.-led wars since 2001 there are over 900,000 people, close to 1 million people who've died. And so we haven't spoken too much about this, but because of the inflation, because of the dire economic situation, because of the atomization of the Western society, they are using, a lot of the governments today in Western Europe are trying to turn their heads away from domestic problems to what is going on in Ukraine, so that people try to think that, okay, well, they're maybe better off than elsewhere in Europe today, but they are all using that because the situation is, we're going into a recession in many countries in Western Europe, and governments just don't know how to manage. So speaking about Ukraine helps them on that, to divert the population from their real concerns, or their interests at least.
Well, Nikola Mirkovic, political analyst, thank you very much for your time today and your insights on that resolution adopted by the Polish government. Thank you.